Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk about Gardenia jasminoides Radicans Variegata, very long name for a variegated trailing gardenia. So this is a Variegated Radicans Gardenia. Radicans Gardenia, the green and variegated versions, are basically ground cover gardenias, although they can creep up in time. I've actually seen them add height. Over time, they're typically pretty much ground cover gardenias. This variegated version has kind of a blue-green foliage. The regular green variety has a much richer green color to it, but somehow the variegated one ends up with this kind of blue, kind of slate gray green color, and then has a creamy white variegation. The new variegation in the early spring is a little brighter. By the time we're filming this in the winter, it settles into kind of a yellowish edge on the leaf, but really great plant for, as an accent ground cover plant. So you can expect Variegated Radicans gardenias to get 1 to 2 feet in height, maybe 3 to 4 feet in width over, 6 to 8 year span, something like that. Ultimately, if it's happy and healthy, I've seen regular Radicans gardenias as tall as 4 feet. There's one up the street from us at a church nearby that's about 3 to 4 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So keep that in mind. But the variegated variety is much slower growing overall. Not going to sugarcoat this. Gardenias can be great garden plants, and they can also be extremely finicky. And this variegated one is not an exception to that. So, a lot of times it's a little bit of trial and error figuring out where gardenias are going to do best in your garden. This one's hardy in zone 8 to 10, I'm going to say, probably 7B to 10, 7B in a protected space. So you would want it out of the winter wind. That kind of thing. The main thing that really gets these is ultimately overwatering. So selecting a site that's going to drain freely is really going to be the ideal situation. It's a gardenia, and of course we're growing gardenias for fragrant flowers, right? This is an underperformer in the flower where flowers come in. The green regular Radicans definitely outflowers this thing, and almost all other varieties of gardenias are going to have showier, larger flowers that really stand out. This one gets double flowers, but they're a little smaller than other varieties and other upright, more vigorous growing varieties. And because they're white, and this is a variegated plant, and it's at the time of the year when this thing has a little bit of white variegation on it, they don't show up all that well. So you'll know it's blooming because they're fragrant, okay? But they don't necessarily, don't think of this as a showy flowering plant. Think of it more as when it flowers, it's very fragrant, but really the main thing I'm using this for is less about flowers and more about that beautiful, bright pop of variegation in a kind of a part shade space 12 months out of the year. One additional thing on the flowers, they do bloom on new wood, and so typically gardenias are spring flowering or early summer flowering is when it's going to have its peak flowering, and then you'll see a few residual flowers on it the rest of the summer, maybe even into early fall, depending on how far south you are, maybe throwing out flowers in the mid and late fall. But the heaviest flowering is going to be that mid to late spring window. Of course, we're using this as a ground cover backdrop to some annual plantings that we do in front of it. It's a perfect little ground cover plant for that. Great in a container, but definitely want to be careful with winter freezes on your containers. So folks in zone 9 and 10 probably can get away with that better than folks in zone 8. In zone 8, it definitely need winter protection if it was used as a container plant. Definitely can be a spiller in a container. So it would be the front piece in the container that would spill down over the front edge of the container. People use these for bonsai. You can actually, you can use gardenias in bonsai, and these Radicans or trailing gardenias make great bonsais. It can be used as a border plant along the edge of a patio or sidewalk, that kind of thing, and just be cut back to the edge of the sidewalk anytime you need to prune them. Great accent plant, and then of course a great specimen plant. Just this one variegated Radicans gardenia out here by itself makes a great statement here in our garden. Again, they definitely need well-drained soil, so the big enemy of these are going to be standing water at any time. So great in sandy soils where it more freely drains. I have a clay-based soil here in Raleigh, so when I plant gardenias, I mound them up a bit so that they're not going to stay wet, especially in the winter time when they're not able to use that water. They like rich, kind of humus-based soils, and that's where my soil is at this point because we've added so much organic material to the top of it over time. So they like that rich soil. Slightly acidic or even very acid soils are fine for gardenias. They don't like alkaline soils at all, but it is salt tolerant. Let's go through a little maintenance on this Variegated Radicans Gardenia. Hopefully, again, you've planted it in an area that drains pretty well, and gardenias do become reasonably drought tolerant once they're established, but it would appreciate a little bit of ongoing watering if it's abnormally dry at any point during the year. So, you know, not a plant that I'm going to 100% trust in the garden. And a lot of times when I say something becomes drought tolerant, doesn't mean it's going to live its best life if we never water it again once it's rooted in. So we're trying to get growth on this plant because that new growth has the best variegation. Also, it blooms on new wood, so having a little bit of growth, you know, will encourage a little bit more flowering as well. So don't let it become just absolutely bone dry in the garden and expect it to be its best that it can be. They can be pruned after they flower in the spring. You know, to control them. What you'll get is a crazy branch that may go a little wider than you want it. Occasionally, you'll get a green sport on these, so it will try to revert back to green at some point in the future. I'm going to see a green spike on this. I'm going to want to quickly cut that out because that green spike of growth is definitely going to be faster growing than the variegated part of this plant, and it's going to take it over pretty quickly. So keep an eye out for that. If you see a green piece in it, get it out quick as possible. We fertilize with an organic fertilizer in the late winter, early spring once, and that's all we need here to keep these in pretty good shape. Our acid soils combined with the fact that there's iron present in the soil keeps them really quite happy in our garden, as long as we're not overwatering. They're deer resistant, rabbit resistant, you know, some of those issues that we have in our gardens are not a problem. Well, they tend to get everything else. So when I say everything else, you can get mealybugs and white flies and all kinds of things on your gardenias, especially if they don't have any air movement around them. You may see white flies being an issue, or stressed plants. This can be an issue. A lot of folks watching this, I'm saying it's hardy outdoors in the ground from zones 8 to 10 or 7B to 10, but a lot of folks can use this outside as a container and then bringing it in the wintertime. But it needs a lot of light inside over the course of the winter. When you bring them inside in the winters, when you really see those mealybugs and aphids and white flies and a lot of the other issues that gardenias can get. So get them back out as quick as possible, back out into the sun. But overall, a very low maintenance plant that, again, you may go through a couple gardenias before you find the perfect spot in your garden. Just throwing that out there. I resold a lot of gardenias over the years because they can be slightly finicky, but they're definitely worth it. I mean, it's a gardenia. That fragrance is unbelievable in our gardens. This variegated one adds a great 12-month pop of color to the garden. So that is Variegated Radicans Gardenia. Thanks for watching.